What if I told you that most of the thoughts you believe are your own are, in fact, planted? Not in the science fiction sense of mind control machines, but in the subtle psychological ways that societies, institutions, and even people close to us bend our unconscious toward their goals. Carl Jung warned us that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. This, right here, is the seed of all manipulation, and also the key to breaking free from it forever. Think about it. Why do advertising campaigns work so effectively? Why do political slogans stay in our minds long after we hear them? Why do toxic relationships repeat the same emotional patterns? It isn't because we are stupid or weak. It's because others are speaking directly to the parts of our psyche we haven't yet met. The shadow we repress, the archetypes that shape our myths, and the collective unconscious that binds us to the group. These are the hidden doorways into our minds, and once you see how they operate, manipulation loses its power. This video is not about teaching you tricks to outsmart manipulators on the surface level. It's not about body language hacks or spotting lies. What Jung revealed was far deeper. Manipulation only thrives in the dark corners of the psyche you refuse to face. The true secret is radical self-awareness. By confronting your shadow, by naming the archetypes playing inside you, by walking the path of individuation, you don't just resist manipulation, you transcend it. Stay with me until the end of this journey, and you will discover the Jungian secret to never being controlled again. Carl Jung once said that the human psyche is like a vast mansion, with most of its rooms locked away from our conscious awareness. We think we live in the living room, the small space of rational thought, willpower, and daily decision-making. But the truth is that beneath the floorboards and behind the walls lies an entire labyrinth that most people never explore. And this labyrinth is exactly where manipulation thrives. To understand how to break free from it, we must first map the architecture of the psyche. Jung described three main layers: the conscious mind, the personal unconscious, and the collective unconscious. The conscious mind is what you and I are using right now. Logic, language, planning, the ego that says, "I am me." It feels powerful, but it is actually the weakest layer when it comes to influence. Manipulators rarely bother with it because it can argue, it can resist, it can say no. The real battleground is the personal unconscious, the storehouse of everything you've forgotten, suppressed, or ignored. Childhood fears, unprocessed traumas, embarrassing desires, unresolved anger. These are not gone. They are waiting. And when someone touches these sensitive nerves, you react before you even know why. Think of how an insult can trigger disproportionate rage, or how a compliment can feel intoxicating when it touches an old wound of neglect. The manipulator doesn't create these reactions. They only press the buttons that were already installed in your psyche. But even deeper lies the collective unconscious, the ancient layer of universal images, myths, and archetypes that all humans share. Here lie the symbols that have guided humanity for thousands of years: the hero, the victim, the mother, the trickster. Leaders, advertisers, and ideologues know, often unconsciously, that if you evoke these archetypes, you bypass critical thinking and ignite primal energy. a political leader who frames themselves as the hero facing the dragon, or a brand that positions its product as the magical talisman to save you from emptiness, is drawing power directly from the collective unconscious. Once you see this hidden architecture, the illusion begins to collapse. Manipulation is never about the surface message. It's about the invisible pathways into your psyche. And if you want freedom, the first step is to stop living only in the living room of your mind and start exploring the whole mansion. If the psyche is a mansion, then the shadow is the dark cellar we refuse to enter. It is the part of ourselves we deny, repress, or reject because it feels unacceptable. For Jung, the shadow was not just the bad parts of us, it was everything we failed to integrate, both negative and positive. And here lies the manipulator's favorite weapon: projection. Projection happens when we disown an aspect of ourselves and see it instead in others. For example, a person who represses their own aggression may constantly accuse others of being hostile. Someone ashamed of their own ambition may resent successful people, labeling them as greedy. This is not conscious. It is automatic, and that's why it's so powerful. Manipulators know, often instinctively, that if they can trigger your shadow, they can control your behavior without you realizing it. Think about propaganda that blames an entire group for society's problems. It works because it offers a target for the collective shadow, fears, desires, or violence that people cannot admit within themselves. Or consider the toxic partner who accuses you of being selfish every time you try to assert your needs. They are not describing you. They are manipulating your guilt by projecting their own selfishness onto you. In both cases, the manipulation only works if you remain unconscious of your own shadow. Jung warned that what we fail to confront within ourselves will rule us from the outside, and the manipulator becomes the mirror, reflecting back what we don't want to see. The insult that stings too deeply, the praise that feels like oxygen, the anger that erupts uncontrollably. These are all signs that your shadow is being touched. And every time you react blindly, you surrender your sovereignty. So how do you disarm this weapon? The answer is not to fight the manipulator directly, but to face the shadow within. When you recognize that the anger, envy, or desire being provoked already exists inside you, you take back the projection. You own it. And once you own it, no one can use it against you. Imagine someone calling you selfish, and instead of collapsing into guilt, you calmly think, "Yes, I can be selfish sometimes, and I choose when to use that energy." Suddenly, the chain is broken. The shadow, then, is not your weakness. It is your shield, once integrated. And this is the first great step toward breaking free from manipulation forever. If the shadow is the cellar of the psyche, then archetypes are the ancient blueprints that give structure to the entire house. Jung described archetypes as universal patterns of thought and behavior inherited from humanity's collective unconscious. They are not personal. They are ancient, timeless, and endlessly recurring. And when left unexamined, they can become invisible puppeteers, pulling our strings without us ever noticing. Consider the archetype of the hero. From myths to modern movies, the hero faces impossible odds, conquers the dragon, and saves the community. This archetype is so deeply wired into our psyche that when a politician frames themselves as the lone warrior against corruption, or when a corporation presents its product as the weapon that will slay your insecurities, we instinctively respond. We want to believe in the hero because the hero lives inside us. Or take the archetype of the victim. When this energy is activated, people surrender their power, waiting for a rescuer to save them. Entire industries thrive on keeping you in victim mode. Self-help schemes that promise salvation. Manipulative leaders who insist only they can deliver safety. The victim archetype is not bad in itself. It helps us recognize vulnerability. But when it is hijacked, it becomes a trap that leaves us dependent on external authority. Then there is the trickster, the shapeshifter who deceives, destabilizes, and manipulates perception. Modern media is full of trickster energy, viral memes, disinformation, satire that distracts rather than enlightens. The trickster archetype is powerful because it disorients us, making it harder to discern truth from illusion. The key point is this: archetypes are not chosen, they are inherited. You cannot turn them off, but you can name them. Jung believed that the moment you can say, "Ah, this is the victim in me," or "this is the hero being manipulated," you gain a critical distance. The archetype no longer acts through you unconsciously. You become the director, not just the actor. Manipulators exploit archetypes precisely because they bypass logic. You don't reason your way into identifying with a hero or surrendering as a victim. You feel it, instantly, in your bones. That's why advertising slogans and political campaigns resonate at a gut level. They are tapping the archetypal code. Freedom begins when you see the strings. If you can spot which archetype is being played in a story, a relationship, or even in your own thoughts, you can step out of the script. And once you step out, you can write a new role for yourself. If archetypes are the ancient puppeteers, then individuation is the process of cutting the strings. Jung saw individuation as the central task of human life, the journey of becoming whole by integrating every fragmented part of the psyche. To individuate is not to become perfect or good, but to bring the unconscious into consciousness, uniting shadow and light, instinct and reason, myth and reality. And here is the secret. Once you walk this path, manipulation loses its grip. Why? Because manipulation thrives in the blind spots. It feeds on unowned shadows, unrecognized archetypes, and forgotten wounds. The individuated person is not free from these energies, but they are aware of them. They can say, "Yes, I have aggression. Yes, I crave recognition. Yes, I fear abandonment. But these are mine to command." And when you own them, no one else can use them as levers against you. Think of it this way. A person who has not faced their shadow can be guilt-tripped endlessly, manipulated by shame or by promises of approval. But the individuated person who has integrated their shadow recognizes the tactic immediately. The manipulator pushes the button, and nothing happens. The system is rewired. This is why Jung described individuation as a shield. It is not a shield that blocks life, but one that transforms every attempt at control into an opportunity for growth. When someone tries to provoke your envy, you can see it as a sign that you need to embrace your own ambition. When a political movement tries to awaken your fear, You can use it to explore the archetypal story they are exploiting. Individuation turns manipulation into a mirror that reflects your next step on the path to wholeness. Practically, individuation is not abstract. It can begin with something as simple as dream journaling. Dreams are direct expressions of the unconscious. By writing them down, by studying their symbols, by noticing recurring figures, you start to dialogue with the very forces that would otherwise manipulate you. Another step is shadow work, consciously exploring traits you dislike in others and asking, where does this live in me? Each time you reclaim a piece of yourself, you reclaim sovereignty. Individuation is not a destination, but a lifelong process. Yet even a single step in this direction makes you harder to control. And the further you go, the less you are swayed by the invisible strings of society, propaganda, or toxic relationships. You begin to live your own myth, not the one written for you. If the personal unconscious makes us vulnerable to individual manipulation, then the collective unconscious exposes us to mass manipulation. Jung described the collective unconscious as the shared reservoir of archetypes and symbols that belong to all humanity. It is why people in every culture tell stories of heroes, tricksters, mothers, and saviors. These images are older than language, and because they are universal, they are the perfect tools for mass control. History gives us countless examples. Totalitarian regimes rose to power not simply through brute force, but by awakening archetypal energies in the masses. The leader becomes the hero or the father figure. The enemy is cast as the shadow or the monster. The people see themselves as victims waiting for salvation. When these archetypes are stirred collectively, reason collapses, and mass movements ignite with frightening speed. Jung himself warned, after observing Nazi Germany, that when archetypal forces erupt unchecked, individuals lose their capacity to think independently. They become possessed by the group mind. But this is not just history. Today, social media functions as an amplifier of the collective unconscious. Viral trends spread not because they are logical, but because they tap into deep archetypal patterns. Outrage at the villain, worship of the hero, laughter at the trickster. Memes, slogans, and hashtags work because they bypass critical thought and resonate with symbolic energy. When millions of people unconsciously identify with the same archetype, the result is mass contagion. This is why Jung stressed the danger of identification. When you identify completely with an archetype, when you become only the hero or only the victim, you surrender your individuality. At that point, you are no longer yourself. You are a vessel for the collective. And manipulators, whether they are politicians, corporations, or influencers, thrive on this surrender. They do not need to convince you. They only need to trigger the archetype already sleeping inside you. So how do you resist? The answer is not isolation, but awareness. By cultivating what Jung called the self, the integrated centered core of your psyche, you create an anchor that the collective storm cannot easily sweep away. When the crowd chants, you can listen, but not dissolve into it. When the archetype surges, You can recognize it without being consumed. The collective unconscious is powerful, but it is not destiny. The individuated person can stand in the middle of the storm and remain rooted, refusing to become a puppet of the mass mind. Up to this point, we've explored how manipulation feeds on the unconscious, through the shadow, through archetypes, through the pull of the collective. But Jung's final insight takes us one step further. The goal is not merely to avoid manipulation. The real secret is to transform every attempt at control into a catalyst for deeper self-mastery. Think about it. Each time someone tries to manipulate you, they are unconsciously pointing to a part of your psyche that remains unexamined. When a toxic partner provokes jealousy, they are showing you where your insecurity still lives. When a political movement stirs your outrage, it reveals which archetypal story you unconsciously identify with. When an ad convinces you that happiness is just one purchase away, it highlights the emptiness you have not yet confronted. The manipulator, in a strange way, becomes your unintentional teacher. This does not mean you should thank or trust manipulators. Their intentions may be selfish or harmful. But Jung's wisdom suggests that you can use their efforts against them. Instead of reacting blindly, you pause and ask, what inside me is being touched right now? Why does this message, this fear, or this promise feel so powerful? By doing so, you redirect the energy inward. The manipulation becomes illumination. In this sense, you cannot ever completely eliminate manipulation from the world. Advertisers will always try to sell. Leaders will always try to persuade. Individuals will always try to influence. But you can strip their power the moment you decide that every attempt at manipulation is a mirror, showing you the work that remains in your own psyche. This is the ultimate shield, not resistance, not denial, but transformation. When your shadow is integrated, projections return home. When your archetypes are recognized, you step out of their script. When your individuality is rooted in the self, the collective unconscious cannot sweep you away. And when manipulation itself becomes a signal for inner work, you shift from being a passive target to an active master of your own mind. Jung's final secret is liberation through consciousness. Every attempt to control you can be the very moment you grow stronger, more sovereign, and more awake. That is how you break free from manipulation, not by escaping it, but by turning it into the raw material of your individuation. As we close this journey, let's return to Jung's timeless warning. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Manipulation is nothing more than the exploitation of what we don't yet see in ourselves. The shadow we repress, the archetypes we unconsciously live out, the collective tides we surrender to. These are the doorways through which influence enters. But the message of Jung's psychology is not despair. It is profound empowerment. The very forces that make you vulnerable to manipulation are also the forces that can set you free. When you face your shadow, no one can guilt you into submission. When you name the archetype being activated, you step outside the script. When you ground yourself in the self, the storm of the collective unconscious cannot pull you under. The truth is, you will never live in a world without manipulation. But you can live in a world where manipulation loses its power over you. Every advertisement, every slogan, Every toxic game becomes a mirror, showing you where the work remains. And the moment you choose to do that work, you are no longer the puppet. You are the one holding the strings. So here is your challenge. In the next days, notice when someone pushes your buttons. Instead of reacting, pause and ask, which part of me is being touched? What shadow? What archetype? What wound is being stirred? That question is the first step to freedom. The Jungian secret is not escape. It is transformation. And once you begin, you will never be manipulated the same way again.